Grief does not always weep. Sometimes, it sharpens. It becomes a blade, cold and patient, forged in the silent hours after the world moves on. It writes itself in the margins of a dead girl's life, in the hollows of a mother's eyes, in the fevered ink of a brother's darkest dreams. This is not a story about a single murder. This is the story of the house that murder built, and of the meticulous, loving father who became the architect of its shadows. You are about to listen to the foundation being laid, brick by brick, body by body. This is Shadow of the Unforgiving. You are listening to Verified Nightmares. If you dare to walk these shadows with us, subscribe for the complete season 1. Leave a like to feed the darkness, turn down the lights, and remember, some debts can only be paid in blood. The first frost. The world was not black and white in the hour before dawn. It was a study in gray, the gray of tombstone slate, of forgotten ashes, of a mind stripped of everything but purpose. Daniel Hartley was a statue in a blind of frosted pine boughs, his breath plumbing in a slow, metronomic rhythm that fogged the lens of his spotting scope. He did not feel the cold. He had swallowed it months ago, and it lived inside him now, a core of permafrost that kept his hands steady and his thoughts clear. The thermal imaging binoculars hung from his neck, a technological ghost against his wool layers. He didn't need them now. He knew his target's rhythm better than his own heartbeat. Markus' rise apartment was a postage stamp of soulless light in the complex below. A first-floor unit, convenient, Daniel thought, the word clinical and dry in his mind. Markus was a creature of predictable vice. Parties on Friday, a blurry Saturday, Sunday spent in hungover oblivion. But it was Wednesday, hump day. Markus would have gone to the dive bar off the highway, where the drinks were cheap, and no one asked questions. He would have left at last call a.m. He would be home by 2:30. It was now 4:07 a.m. The lag was the drugs, the little something extra to take the edge off the world. Daniel knew the pharmacology of it. He had studied. A pair of headlights speared the gloom, weaving slightly up the access road. A 10-year-old coupe, bass thumping dully even through the closed windows. It parked crookedly in a spot marked 8B. The engine died. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant moan of a pre-dawn plow on the main road. The car door opened. A lanky silhouette unfolded itself, fumbling with the keys. The jingle was a sharp, tinny sound that carried in the frozen air. Markus. He wore a thin jacket, shivered, dropped the keys, swore the word. A puff of vapor. Daniel's gloved fingers found the case beside him. It was a hard-sided medical kit, shock-proof, sterile. He opened it with a soft click. Inside, nestled in foam, were his tools. Not the tools of his old life, the pencils, the blueprints, the scale rulers. These were different. A small glass bottle of clear liquid, a syringe, pre-filled with a viscous, amber-colored solution, a packet of alcohol wipes, which smelled of astringent false cleanliness, and a square of white cloth, folded with geometric precision. He took the cloth and the bottle. He unscrewed the cap, and the scent that rose was sweetly chemical, like artificial peaches cut with rubbing alcohol. He soaked the center of the cloth, careful not to let it drip. The liquid was a fast-acting, soluble anesthetic. It would work through the mucous membranes of the nose and mouth in under 15 seconds. He tested it on himself first, in his sealed garage, with a timer and a heart monitor. He knew the exact count between application and unconsciousness. 12 seconds. He knew the duration of efficacy. 4 to 6 minutes. A window. Markus was at his door, head bowed, struggling with the lock. Daniel moved. He was a shadow disengaging from deeper shadow. His boots made no sound on the hoarfrost-crusted grass. He had cut across the lawn, avoiding the salted walkways. He came up behind Markus just as the deadbolt gave way with a heavy clunk. Late night, Markus mumbled to no one, pushing the door open. Daniel's left arm hooked around Markus's neck, not to choke, but to anchor. The heel of his gloved palm clamped hard over Markus's mouth, sealing the question that never formed. At the same moment, his right hand pressed the soaked cloth firmly over Markus's nose. The reaction was instant and violent. Markus bucked, a gut-ruffled scream vibrating against Daniel's palm. Elbows flew back, connecting weakly with Daniel's ribs. Daniel absorbed the blows like stone. His grip was implacable. He began the count in his head. 1,000. Markus's thrashing took them both over the threshold into the dark, warm apartment. The smell of stale beer and old pizza rushed out. 1,000. The strength was already leaching from Markus's limbs. His kicks became twitches. 1,000. A full body shudder. 1,000. Markus went completely, bonelessly slack. Daniel lowered him to the cheap laminate floor, easing him onto his back. He did not turn on the light. The ambient glow from a digital clock 4:09 and the street lamp outside was enough. He rolled up Markus's left sleeve. The skin was pale, a track of faded needle marks visible along the vein. Predictable. From his pocket, he produced the syringe. He flicked the cap off with his thumb. The needle caught the faint light, a silver bead. He found the vein, slid the needle in. There was no resistance. He depressed the plunger, slowly, steadily. The amber fluid disappeared into Markus' Rye's bloodstream. This was the cocktail, his own design, a potent stimulant to jolt the central nervous system into hyper-awareness, paired with a powerful dissociative hallucinogen. It would not cause peaceful dreams. It would craft a hell so personalized, so visceral, that the mind would shred itself trying to escape before the final, catastrophic cardiac arrest. Daniel leaned down, his lips close to Markus's ear. The boy's eyes were open wide, pupils already dilating into black pits, seeing things that weren't in the room. A thin line of drool traced from his slack mouth. "You gave her the wrong mix," Daniel whispered, his voice flat. A statement of fact. He watched. He was the artist observing his canvas. He saw the terror dawn in those unseeing eyes. The silent scream. The twitches that became spasms. A wet stain spread across the crotch of Markus's jeans. Daniel noted it dispassionately. He checked his watch. 93 seconds after injection, Markus's back arched in a final, rigid bow. A choked gasp escaped, a sound like a foot stepping on gravel. Then stillness. Daniel waited a full 5 minutes. He checked for a carotid pulse. Nothing. He then began the meticulous work of the frame. He took a small, generic pill bottle from his kit, oxycodone, acquired from a different grave, and pressed it into Markus's right hand, curling the fingers around it. He placed a used syringe, clean of his prints, on the floor nearby. He wiped every surface he might have touched: the doorknob, the light switch, the edge of the table they'd bumped. He stood in the doorway, looking back at the scene. A tragic, sordid, understandable overdose. The world would nod, make a tea-esking sound, and move on. They had moved on from Ella too. He melted back into the graying dawn. The cold had deepened. His truck was parked 2 miles away, in the lot of a closed church. He drove home through the waking world, past houses where lights were clicking on, where people were brewing coffee, where lives were beginning another day. He entered his own house through the garage. It was silent. He went to the kitchen sink, ran the water scalding hot, and scrubbed his hands and forearms with the harsh, lemon-scented soap Maya bought. He scrubbed until the skin was red and raw. He stared at his reflection in the black kitchen window. The face that looked back was familiar, yet utterly alien. The eyes were the same hazel. The lines were the same, but the man behind them was gone. He walked upstairs, past Leo's door. He heard the soft, rasping snore of his son. He stopped at the last door on the left, Ella's. He didn't open it. He simply laid his forehead against the cool wood, his clean, raw hands flat on the painted surface. The first debt was paid, he thought, the words clear and cold as ice in his mind. 10 remain. The last laugh. The bass wasn't just heard. It was a physical presence. It lived in the floorboards, thrummed up through the soles of Ella's borrowed platform boots, and settled deep in her molars, a constant, delicious vibration. Ryan Finley's house was a pulsating organism of heat and shadow, a labyrinth of packed bodies and stolen, secret moments. The air was a thick soup of spilled beer, cloying vanilla vape clouds, and the salty sweet smell of teenage sweat. Ella Hartley was a spark in the center of it all, glowing. She'd arrived an hour ago with Chloe and Jenna, a triumvirate of borrowed confidence. Chloe, with her phone held aloft like a scepter, documenting everything. Jenna, a live wire of nervous energy, flitting from group to group. And Ella, feeling the 2 vodka cranberries hum in her veins, letting the music move her in the crowded living room. This was it. This belonging. This was the antidote to the quiet of her own perfectly ordered house, to the worried glance her mother had given her crop top, to the silent, thoughtful presence of her older brother Leo in his room. Here, she was not a daughter or a sister. She was just Ella, a shape in the strobe light, laughing. "Hartley, you made it." Ryan, the host, materialized from the crush, his face sheened with sweat and triumph. He slung a heavy arm around her shoulders, smelling of cheap whiskey and Axe body spray. "Kegs in the kitchen, but the good shit's in the basement. Markus has the keys to the kingdom." He winked, a gesture that was meant to be conspiratorial, but just made him look like a cartoon. She laughed, the sound swallowed by the DJ's drop. "Lead the way, Finley." The journey through the house was a tactile adventure. Her shoulder brushed against damp T-shirts. A stranger's hand steadied her waist as she squeezed past, his fingers lingering a half-second too long. The carpet in the hallway was sticky with some unidentifiable spill. They passed. Tyler Vance sprawled on a battered plush couch, his head thrown back in a braying laugh at something on his phone, utterly disconnected from the bodies dancing around him. He gave Ella a lazy, glassy-eyed wave. In the kitchen, Aiden Cole was playing bartender with a frightening dedication, pouring a rainbow of liquors into a giant plastic pitcher. "Taste the rainbow, Hartley," he yelled, offering her a red plastic cup of the murky, brownish result. She took a sip. It tasted like cough syrup and regret. She made a face, and Aiden's laughter was a sharp bark. "That's the spirit." Jenna found them, her eyes wide. "Have you seen Sasha? She's telling everyone about what happened with Matt at the football game. And it is not the story he told." Jenna was a vortex of other people's drama, thriving on it. And then there was Liam Byrne. He stood by the sliding glass door to the back patio, a solitary figure in the chaos. He held a bottle of water, not a beer. His eyes scanned the room, not with judgment, but with the quiet, watchful calm. He caught Ella's eye and offered a small, genuine smile, an anchor in the storm. She smiled back, feeling suddenly, briefly seen. The basement was another world. Colder, damper, the bass from upstairs, a muffled heartbeat through the ceiling. It was darker, lit only by a single, spinning disco ball that cast frantic silver dots over concrete walls adorned with old band posters. And there, perched on a battered washing machine like a king on a throne of rust, was Markus Rye. Markus had an aura. It was the aura of access. He was skinny, all sharp angles and sharper eyes, and he regarded the small cluster of people around him with a benign, detached superiority. A variety of little bags and pills were arranged on a folded bandana beside him. "Ella," he said, his voice smooth. "Welcome to the inner sanctum." He held out a hand. In his palm were 2 small pills, one a cheerful orange, the other a pale, chalky blue. A little fuel for the fire. Orange is just a vibe. Blue's the express elevator. Your pick. Chloe was already filming, her phone's light a sterile square in the moody dark. "For the memories," she chirped. Ella's heart did a little skip that wasn't entirely from the alcohol. This was the line, the one her health teacher had drawn in a boring PowerPoint, the one her dad had talked about in one of his rare, serious talks, his architect's mind framing it as a structural risk. But the orange pill looked harmless, like a piece of candy. The blue one looked like a secret. "What's in them?" she asked, trying to sound casual, worldly. Markus's smile widened. "The orange? Mostly caffeine, it'll be 12. A glorified energy drink. The blue?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "That's a little magic. Makes the music feel like it's painting the air. Makes everything softer, brighter. No edge, just vibe. I swear." The word "swear" did it. It was so juvenile, so transparent. But the music pulls down the stairs, a siren call. The blue pill promised a transformation, shedding of the last of her insecurities. She wanted the softness. She wanted the bright. "The blue," she said, her voice barely audible over the thump. She took it from his palm. It was surprisingly light. She didn't wait for water. She put it on her tongue, a bitter, chemical chalk, and dry swallow. It caught in her throat for a terrifying second before sliding down. For a while, nothing. Then, a warmth started in her stomach, different from the alcohol. It spread outwards, a golden liquid heat. The spinning disco ball dots became tracers, painting languid arcs across the concrete. The muffled bass from upstairs became a physical texture, something she could almost run her fingers through. Someone handed her another cup, this one from the kitchen pitcher. It tasted like nothing like air. She drank it down. She was back in the living room, but it was a different room. The edges of everything were blurred, beautiful. She was dancing, but it felt like floating. Chloe's phone was in her face, a glowing cyclops eye. "Ella, you're like glowing." Chloe's voice was tinny, far away. Jenna was beside her, saying something about needing air, about how hot it was. Ella laughed. It was the last true laugh. It bubbled out of her, pure and unfiltered. She felt invincible. She felt beautiful. She felt. The shift was not a switch, but a sinkhole. The golden warmth curdled, turning leaden and hot in her gut. The tracers from the lights became smears, nauseating. The music, once a texture, became a pounding, punishing weight inside her skull. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't in her teeth anymore. It was behind her eyes, each beat a spike of pressure. "Ella?" Jenna's voice was sharp, a needle in the fog. She tried to say she was fine, but her tongue was a thick, useless thing. The room tilted, not a pleasant, swimming tilt, but a violent, lurching yaw, as if the floor had turned to gel beneath her. She reached out for the back of a chair, missed. The sticky carpet rushed up to meet her. The impact was a dull thud, swallowed by the music. But the world had gone silent for her. She was on her side, knees drawn up. She could see boots, shuffling feet. The bass was now a distant, horrible throbbing in the roots of her teeth. Above her, faces swam into view, blurred moons of concern and confusion. Chloe's face, the phone now pointed down, the light blinding. "Oh shit, Ella, get up, you're messing up my shot." Tyler's laugh, that same braying sound, but now tinged with nervousness. "Holy crap, she's wrecked." Jenna, shrieking, "Someone do something. Is she breathing?" And then Liam, pushing through. His face was the clearest thing she'd seen all night, sharp with fear. He dropped to his knees, his hands on her shoulders. "Ella, Ella, look at me." His voice was an anchor, but she was adrift. She tried to focus on his eyes, but they were doubling, swimming. The world was narrowing, the edges bleeding into black. The sounds became distorted, stretched, and thin. Jenna's shriek was a seagull's cry. Tyler's laugh was the crackle of static. The music was a dying heartbeat. She felt hands under her arms, lifting. Her head lolled back. The ceiling with its dusty fan spun in a slow, sickening circle. She was moving, being carried. The noise of the party receded, replaced by the crunch of gravel, the slam of a car door, the roar of an engine. In the dark, jostling womb of the car, the last of the feeling left her limbs. The tunnel of sound and light collapsed to a single, distant point. The last thing she heard was not music, but the sound of her own name, screamed from very, very far away. The threshold. Silence had a texture, Maya thought. In the deep well of the night, after Daniel had gone up to bed with a soft kiss on her temple, and Leo's music had finally clicked off, it was a soft, velvety thing. She cherished it. It was in these quiet hours that the house felt most like her own, a living, breathing entity she tended to. The hum of the refrigerator was its steady pulse. The occasional creak of a settling floorboard was its sigh. She sat in the pool of light from the single reading lamp, a botanical journal open, but unread on her lap, her fingers tracing the raised veins of a pressed lupine specimen. Ella was out, at a party. It was a faint, buzzing worry at the edge of her consciousness, but she soothed it with routine. Ella was 17. She was with Chloe and Jenna. She would come home smelling of cheap perfume and gossip, and Maya would pretend to be asleep to spare her the scrutiny. The knock shattered the silence like a brick through stained glass. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a frantic, irregular thudding bang, 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 as if someone was striking the door with the heel of their hand. Maya's heart gave a single, hard knock against her ribs in answer. She marked her page, a slow, deliberate motion against the sudden tide of alarm, and stood. The hallway was dark and long. The knocking grew more desperate. Through the frosted glass of the front door, she saw blurred, shifting shapes. "Ella," she called out, her voice thin in the cavernous quiet of the house. No answer but the knocking. She turned the deadbolt, its clunk obscenely loud, and pulled the door open. The cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and cheap beer. Two figures hunched on her porch. Jenna Palmer, her face a mask of streaked mascara and sheer panic, was half holding, half dragging a limp form. And that form was Ella. Ella's head lolled against Jenna's shoulder, her mouth slack. Her eyes were half open, showing only the whites. One of her borrowed platform boots was missing. The citrus scent of her perfume was drowned under the reek of vomit, sweat, and something sweetly chemical that made Maya's nose itch. She just collapsed. Jenna wailed, her voice cracking. At the door, "We brought her home. She just walked in and fell. I swear we didn't know." Maya didn't hear the rest. The world narrowed to the terrifying, inert weight of her daughter. All the latent worry in her veins ignited into pure, white-hot adrenaline. She surged forward, her hands finding Ella's cold, clammy face. "Ella, baby, look at me," Ella groaned, a low, animal sound that held no recognition. Her skin was the color of old parchment. "Daniel," Maya's shout was not a word, but a raw force ripped from her lungs. It tore through the sleeping house, a sound of pure fracture. "Daniel." The weight shifted as Jenna, sobbing, tried to pass Ella off. Maya took it, staggering back into the foyer. Ella was a dead weight, all loose limbs and lolling head. Maya's knees buckled, and she went down, not falling, but sinking to the cool hardwood, cradling her daughter's upper body in her lap. Ella's hair, usually so shiny, was matted with something sticky. Maya's fingers came away smelling of punch and regret. Thundering footsteps on the stairs. Daniel appeared in boxers and a t-shirt, his face wiped clean of sleep, eyes wide and instantly assessing. Behind him, Leo, hair mussed, froze in the doorway to the living room, his face a snapshot of dawning horror. "What happened?" Daniel's voice was a blade, sharp and controlled, as he dropped to his knees beside them. "She's drunk. She's just really drunk. We couldn't wake her up in the car," Jenna babbled from the doorway. Daniel ignored her. His architect's hands, usually so precise with pencil and ruler, went to Ella's throat, feeling for a pulse. He pried open an eyelid. Maya saw the pupil, massively dilated, a black pool swallowing the hazel iris. Daniel's own eyes flicked to Maya's, and in that glance, she saw the first fissure of his calm. It wasn't just drunk. "Leo, get blankets from the couch. Maya, help me get her to the sofa." It was a clumsy, graceless procession. Daniel took Ella's shoulders, Maya her feet. Her missing sock felt obscenely vulnerable. They laid her on the soft, cream-colored sofa, a piece chosen for family movie nights. Now, Ella's soiled dress stained it. Leo stood like a sentinel, clutching a knitted throw, his eyes glued to his sister's ashen face. "We need to get her warm, get fluids in her," Daniel said, the practical patriarch. "Leo, water." "Maya, a cold cloth for her head. She's overheated." Maya moved like an automaton. In the kitchen, she ran a dishcloth under cold water, her own hands trembling violently. This was the script. You found them drunk. You put them in the recovery position. You waited it out. This was the script for a college kid, not her straight-a daughter, who loved lupines and hated the taste of beer. Back in the living room, Daniel was trying to prop Ella up to trickle water into her mouth. Most of it ran down her chin, carving clean tracks through the grime on her neck. Leo hovered, holding the glass, his knuckles white. "Come on, sweetheart," Daniel murmured, his voice a strained parody of comfort. "Wake up for Dad. Just open your eyes." Ella murmured something. It was not a word, but a slurry, guttural collection of sounds. Her body gave a sudden, violent twitch, a full-body jerk that made them all startle. Minutes bled into an hour. The clock on the mantel ticked, each second a hammer blow. The initial shock calcified into a thick, choking dread. Ella was not getting better. Her breathing had changed shallow, rapid little pants, like a bird trapped in a chimney. The pallor had deepened to a ghastly gray. Maya sat on the edge of the coffee table, holding Ella's limp hand, rubbing it as if she could chafe warmth back into it. She was staring at the delicate blue veins on her daughter's wrist when she saw it. A dark, crimson bloom, seeping through the thin fabric of Ella's dress, low on her abdomen. For a moment, Maya's brain refused to process it. It was just a shadow, a trick of the lamplight. Then it spread, a slow, relentless stain, vivid against the light color. A sound escaped Maya's throat, not a scream, but a choked, airless gasp, as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the world. Daniel followed her gaze. His face, already taut, went utterly blank, the color draining from it. "Oh, God," Leo whispered, the glass of water slipping from his hand. It hit the rug with a dull thud, a dark star of moisture spreading instantly, mingling with whatever had already been spilled. The paralysis broke. Daniel moved with a sudden, terrifying efficiency. "Get the car keys. Front door. Now." He scooped Ella off the sofa as if she weighed nothing. The throw blanket fell away. The bloodstain was a grotesque Rorschach blot, still spreading. Maya fumbled for her purse, for the keys, her fingers numb and stupid. Leo yanked the front door open, holding it wide. The night air was a slap. They piled into Daniel's SUV, Maya in the back, cradling Ella's head in her lap. Daniel reversed out of the driveway so fast the tires screeched. In the dome light, Maya looked down. Ella's beautiful face was a stranger's face, waxy and still. Her lips were tinged with blue. Maya prayed. She begged a God she hadn't spoken to in years. She promised anything, everything. The hospital was a 10-minute drive that spanned an eternity. Daniel ran a red light, his jaw a stone carving. No one spoke. The only sounds were the roar of the engine and Ella's terrible, shallow panting. Daniel skidded into the emergency drop-off lane, the vehicle lurching to a halt. He was out before it fully settled, wrenching open the back door. "Help us, my daughter." Maya helped him pull Ella out. Her dress was sodden now, warm and sticky against Maya's arms. A nurse pushing a wheelchair appeared, her professional calm a surreal contrast to their raw horror. As they transferred Ella from their arms to the wheelchair, Maya's foot slipped. She looked down. There, on the clean, gray concrete of the hospital driveway, illuminated by the harsh sodium vapor light, was a single, perfect drop of her daughter's blood. It was black as oil, a tiny, dark moon against the vast, indifferent expanse of pavement. Then the automatic doors hissed open, swallowing the wheelchair, the nurse, Daniel, and the ghost of her daughter into a blinding, antiseptic white light. Maya stood for 1 second, 2, staring at that drop of blood, the threshold between the before and the after. Then she ran inside, leaving the night and the life she knew behind. Empty chairs. The silence in the Hartley kitchen was a solid, viscous thing. It filled the space between the modern cabinets and the farmhouse table, thick enough to swim in, dense enough to muffle the morning birdsong outside. The only sounds were the brittle scrape of a knife on toast and the dull, rhythmic click of Daniel's spoon against his ceramic cereal bowl, tiny, maddening metronome marking the passage of a life they were no longer living. Leo sat, shoulders hunched inward, trying to make himself smaller. He focused on the toast in his hand. It was burnt at the edges, the carbon scraping unpleasantly against his teeth, tasting of ash. He'd made it himself. His mother, Maya, sat across from him, stirring a cup of tea she would never drink. Her eyes were fixed on a point just past the table's centerpiece, a dried bouquet Ella had arranged in happier days, now gathering a film of dust. She was a ghost haunting her own kitchen. And then there was the empty chair, Ella's chair. It wasn't just unoccupied. It was a black hole, a negative space that warped the gravity of the entire room. Every glance, every thought, was inevitably pulled into its vortex. The cheerful sunflower pattern cushion she'd picked out as a kid mocked them all. I should have picked her up. The thought was a broken record, a neural groove worn deep. It played behind every bite of ashen toast, every tick of the clock. She'd texted him, just after midnight. "Hey, Leo, can you come get me? Place is getting weird." He'd been deep in a chapter of a book, annoyed at the interruption. "Get Ryan or I den. I'm busy." He'd silenced his phone. Busy. The word was a small, hot coal in his stomach now, burning forever. Daniel finished his cereal, the final click of the spoon against the empty bowl, sounding like a period at the end of a sentence no one had spoken. He rose, carried his bowl to the sink, and rinsed it with a surgeon's precision. He moved through the world now like a man occupying a meticulously constructed shell. There was no superfluous motion, no wasted energy. He was a blueprint of a father. The doorbell rang. The sound was so alien, so violently out of place in their mausoleum, that all three of them flinched. Maya's spoon clattered into her saucer. Daniel's rinsing hands went still. Leo felt his heart begin a rapid, stupid thumping against his ribs. Daniel dried his hands on a towel, the gesture unnervingly slow, and went to answer it. Leo heard the low murmur of voices in the foyer. A woman's voice, calm, professional. Then Daniel led her into the kitchen. "This is Detective Vance," he said, his voice flat. "She has some follow-up questions." Detective Naomi Vance was in her 40s, with a kind, tired face that didn't match the sharpness in her gray eyes. She wore a sensible jacket and carried no visible notebook, which made her seem more dangerous, not less. Her gaze swept the room, taking in the tableau of grief. Maya's untouched tea, Leo's crumbling toast, the screaming empty chair. "I'm sorry to intrude on your morning," she said, her voice a low, steady alto. "Just tying up some loose ends on the investigation into your daughter's passing." Passing. Such a clean, gentle word for the bloody, chaotic horror of that night. She pulled out the chair next to Ella's, the one usually reserved for a guest, and sat without waiting for an invitation. It was a power move, subtle, but effective. She was in their space now. "Leo," she said, turning those assessing eyes on him. "You were at home that night, is that right?" He nodded, his throat too tight for words. "But you were in touch with your sister?" A text. His voice was a croak. He cleared it. "She asked for a ride. I was reading. I told her to get one from someone else." He braced for the judgment, the "how could you?" But Vance just gave a slow, understanding nod. "Teenage brothers. I've got one. They'd probably leave me stranded too." She offered a small, weary smile that didn't reach her eyes. Did she say why she wanted to leave? Did she sound scared? Leo replayed the text in his mind. "Place is getting weird." Not scared, just done. She said it was getting weird. Weird how? "I don't know. I didn't ask." The coal in his gut burned hotter. Vance shifted her weight, the chair creaking. "Since then, have you heard anything? From her friends, maybe? People talking online?" Sometimes, after a tragedy, folks start to remember details they didn't think were important before. Leo felt a prickle of sweat at the base of his spine. This wasn't about Ella. This was about him. What did he know? What was he hiding? "No, nothing. I don't really talk to them." "I see." Vance's gaze drifted to his hands, which were clenched around his napkin, twisting it. "Your dad mentioned you're right." Leo's head snapped up. Daniel was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching. He had offered this information. "Why? I like to write," Leo managed. "I find writing can be a great outlet for grief," Vance said, her tone conversational, almost friendly. "Getting things down on paper." "Did you ever write about Ella? About what happened?" The room seemed to tilt. The air grew thinner. "She knows about the journal." The thought was instantaneous, paranoid. He'd told no one. Just some personal stuff. Thoughts. "It's private." Of course, Vance said, holding up a placating hand. "Completely understand. I only ask because sometimes, in those raw, private thoughts, we capture a truth about a person that official reports miss. A spirit. It could help us build a fuller picture of her, for the file." She leaned forward slightly. "Would you be willing to share any of that? Even just a page?" "It would be for her, Leo. To help us remember her, right?" Panic, cold and slick, flooded his veins. The images in his journal were not tributes. They were tumors. They were fantasies of Markus choking on his own pills, of Ryan's house collapsing on his smug face, of Chloe and her damn phone. "No," he said, the word coming out too sharp, too fast. It's not like that. It's just for me. A beat of heavy silence. Vance's eyes held his, and in them, he saw the friendly mask slip just a fraction, revealing the detective beneath, calculating, curious, unconvinced. "I see," she said again, the words holding new weight. She stood up, the chair scraping loudly. "Well, I won't take up any more of your family's time. Thank you for your help, Leo." She left as quietly as she had come. The silence she left behind was different now, charged, suspicious, polluted. Leo couldn't stay. He mumbled something about homework and fled to his room, the sanctuary that was no longer safe. He closed the door and leaned against it, his breath coming in short gasps. After a moment, he went to his closet, moved a stack of old college textbooks, and retrieved the black leather journal from its hiding place. The cover was cool and smooth. He opened it. The pages were a chaotic mix of grief-stricken elegies and meticulously detailed revenge fantasies. He flipped past the early, tear-smudged pages, past the entry for Markus that screamed in red ink, until he found a fresh sheet. He clicked his pen. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Chloe Finch," he wrote, the letters digging deep into the paper. She saw Ella as content, a shot to be framed. Her eyes were a lens, her phone a weapon. She didn't see a person dying. She saw a story dying. His pen began to move faster, scratching and scraping, exercising the poison in his mind. He didn't write a murder. He wrote a correction, a surgical removal of the tools of violation. The light from the screen is the last thing she should see, reflected in something sharp. She should hear the crunch of plastic and glass, the silencing of her own curated world. Before she hears the silence forever, she should understand, in that final, blinding flash, what it means to be observed in your worst moment, and offered no help, only a caption. He wrote until his hand cramped, and the page was a dark forest of furious ink. He felt drained, hollowed out, and no cleaner for it. He closed the cover on the screaming silence, not knowing he had just handed a blueprint to the monster in the hall. Outside his door, in the shadowed hallway, Daniel Hartley stood motionless, having heard every word of the detective's visit. He had seen the panic in his son's eyes, and now, as he listened to the frantic scratching of the pen cease, a new, cold calculation settled behind his own. Blue lights. Time shattered in the glare of the emergency room lights. One moment, they were stumbling through the automatic doors, the cold night at their backs. The next, they were engulfed in a storm of controlled chaos. The air was a brutal cocktail of antiseptic, stale coffee, and underlying human sickness. A triage nurse took one look at Ella's lolling head and the dark stain on her dress, and snapped into action. Room 3. Now, Daniel moved with them, a ghost tethered to the gurney, his arm still cradle-shaped and sticky with his daughter's blood. The metallic scent of it, mixed with the hospital's lemon-lime disinfectant, created a nauseating perfume of failure. Blue-scrubbed strangers converged, a well-practiced swarm. They transferred Ella to a bed, their voices a overlapping tapestry of urgent, coded language. "Get me a line. Large bore. BP is 70/40 and falling. O2, sat 88%. What's her name? Sir, what is her name?" The question, so basic, hit Daniel like a physical blow. "Ella," he rasped. "Ella Hartley. She's 17. A young doctor with tired eyes focused on him. "What did she take, Mr. Hartley? Pills? Something she smoked or snorted?" When Daniel's mind, an architect's mind built for precision, scrambled for the blueprint, there was none. "I don't know. She was at a party. She came home like this. She'd been drinking." The answers were pathetic, structurally unsound. Maya, clinging to his arm, her body trembling violently, offered fragments. She smelled chemical, sweet, and vomit. Her pupils were huge. She just kept twitching. Her voice broke on the last word. Did she have access to opioids? Fentanyl? MDMA? No, I don't know. Maybe? Daniel's certainty, the foundation of his life, was turning to sand. He was pushed back, gently but firmly, as the team worked. A curtain was drawn, separating them from the frantic efforts to save their daughter's life. The last thing he saw was a respiratory therapist tilting Ella's head back, slipping a plastic tube into her mouth. A social worker with a kind, exhausted face materialized. "Come with me, please. We need to let them work." She led them to a room that was an insult to human suffering. The family consultation room, soundproofed, beige, decorated with a bland print of abstract waves. It held a vinyl sofa, a box of tissues, and a profound, deafening silence. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a vacuum. The wait was an excavation, every second mined deeper into Daniel's psyche, unearthing fresh layers of blame. He paced the short length of the room, his dress sock silent on the industrial carpet. Each footfall was an accusation. Letting her go. She'd worn that damned crop top. He'd said nothing, wanting to be the cool dad, the understanding one. Structural flaw. The text. He'd been asleep. His phone was on silent on his nightstand, a mere foot from his head. A failure of vigilance. The home care, the ice pack, the sips of water, the comforting lies they'd told themselves. Amateurish, disastrous interventions that wasted precious minutes. He, a man who designed buildings to withstand hurricanes and earthquakes, had tried to fix his dying daughter with a bag of frozen peas. He saw Maya cross the room, curled into herself on the sofa, staring at the blood on her hands, Ella's blood. She hadn't tried to wash it off. It was a covenant, a damning mark. An hour passed, or a day. Time had no meaning in the beige vacuum. A different doctor entered, older, with a lined face that had delivered too much bad news. He didn't sit. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, I'm Dr. Chen. We've stabilized her for the moment, but she's in critical condition." His words were clean, clinical, each one a scalpel. "We've intubated her to protect her airway. Her blood work shows a toxic level of alcohol and the presence of a synthetic cathinone, a bath salt derivative. It's caused a severe hypertensive crisis, which led to a catastrophic cerebral edema. Her brain is swelling, and the pressure is significant." Daniel heard the terms. Synthetic cathinone, cerebral edema. They were just words, abstract and technical. He grasped for the translation. "The swelling, you can reduce it, right? Surgery?" Dr. Chen's eyes, dark and depthless, held his. "We're administering the strongest diuretics and steroids we have. We've placed a monitor to track the intracranial pressure, but the damage from the initial event, combined with the prolonged period of hypoxia before she arrived." He paused, a millisecond of humanity. "The situation is very grave. We are doing everything medically possible." Grave. Not serious. Not critical. Grave. A word for things buried. Another stretch of hollow time. Daniel stopped pacing. He stood in the center of the room, a column of dread. Maya started to whisper, a frantic, prayer-like mantra of "please, please, please," directed at no one. When Dr. Chen returned, his posture had changed. The fight was gone from his shoulders. The clinical detachment remained, but it was now a shroud, not a shield. He didn't need to speak. The finality was in the quiet click of the door, in the way he finally sank into the chair opposite them. "I'm so sorry," he said. The preamble of defeat. The words that followed were a distant earthquake. Pressure continued to rise. Brainstem herniation. No neurological response. They meant nothing and everything. They were the official stamps on a death certificate not yet written. "You can see her now," Dr. Chen said softly. "We've made her comfortable." Comfortable. The final, cruel euphemism. The Bay was quieter. The storm had passed, leaving wreckage. They were led to a curtained area. The machines were still there, but their screens were dark, their sounds stilled. The tube was gone from Ella's mouth. She looked like she was sleeping. Someone had washed her face. The vomit and grime were gone. Her hair was brushed back from her forehead. She was pale, waxy, but peaceful. A white sheet was pulled up to her chest, hiding the stained dress. It was a lie more beautiful and terrible than any Daniel had ever seen. A nurse was quietly coiling a disconnected monitor cable. She gave them a sorrowful glance and slipped out, giving them the illusion of privacy. Maya made a small, animal sound and collapsed into the chair by the bed, taking Ella's hand, pressing it to her wet cheek. Daniel stood at the foot of the bed. This was his daughter. This was the tiny weight he'd cradled in the crook of his arm, The giggling toddler who'd ridden on his shoulders. The willful teenager who'd rolled her eyes at his jokes. This shell, this monument to his negligence. He forced himself to move closer. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment over hers where it lay on the sheet. Then he touched it. The cold was absolute. It was not the cool of skin in a cold room. It was a deep, invasive cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the cold of absence, of void. It shot up his arm, into his chest, and seized something vital inside him. He reached out to touch her hand, and the unbearable cold of her skin was the first brick in the wall that would soon encase what was left of him. Ink and blood. The air in interview room B was thin, recycled, and tasted of dust and stale regret. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, a trapped insect of sound, casting a sickly greenish pallor over the chipped Formica table. Leo Hartley sat with his back to the mirrored wall, knowing it was probably two-way glass, feeling watched from all sides. The chair was bolted to the floor, unforgiving against his spine. Across the table, Detective Naomi Vance sipped coffee from a paper cup, the steam curling like a ghost in the chilled air. She hadn't spoken for a full minute, just letting the silence press down on him. It was a tactic. Leo knew it was a tactic, and that knowledge only made it more effective. Meanwhile, in the major case squad room, Vance scrolled through the preliminary report on her computer screen. Markus Rye, 21, found deceased in his apartment, apparent drug overdose. A photo of the scene showed a sad, sordid tableau. A young man on a dirty floor, a needle nearby, a pill bottle in hand, open and shut. The medical examiner's initial note concurred. Toxic combination of fentanyl and synthetic stimulants. But the date gnawed at her. 2 days after she'd first visited the Hartleys. After she'd asked Leo about his sister's party, she pulled up the old file on Ella Hartley, scrolled to the list of names from the party statements. There it was. Markus Rye admitted to being present, denied providing substances. A coincidence? Maybe. But Vance had been a detective for 18 years. She believed in coincidence about as much as she believed in unicorns. She opened a new window, typed a query, one by one. Driver's license photos and basic files for the other 10 party attendees populated her screen. Chloe Finch. Tyler Vance, no relation, thankfully. Jenna Palmer. Ryan Finley. A gallery of young, careless faces. Your mother said you've been keeping to yourself, Leo. Vance's voice cut through the room's hum. Leo jerked his gaze from his own twisting hands to her face. Yeah, I guess. Writing a lot? The question was a needle, slipped in between the ribs. Some in that journal. Her tone was conversational, but her eyes were scanners. Leo's throat constricted. Just thoughts. Like I said. Vance nodded slowly, took another sip of coffee. She let the silence build again, then dismantled it with casual brutality. One of the kids from that party died. Markus Rye. Overdose. You hear about that? The shock that hit Leo was pure and physical. A cold splash of water in his face. His mouth went dry. Markus. The name from his journal. The first entry, splattered with red ink. Rage. Dead. He hadn't wished for this. Not really. Not in the real world. His mind scrambled. Did she know? Could she see the words "I hope you choke on them" flashing above his head like a subtitle? He saw his own reaction reflected in the careful neutrality of Vance's expression, the widening of his eyes, the quick intake of breath, and beneath the shock, to his own horror, a tiny, dark flower blooming a sharp petal of satisfaction. Markus, who had handed Ella the little blue piece of chalk that helped kill her, was gone. The world was marginally balanced. Vance saw the flicker. The shock was genuine. The thing that came after wasn't grief. That's terrible, Leo managed, the words ash in his mouth. Isn't it? Vance agreed, her voice flat. She leaned forward, her arms on the table. Leo, I need to see that journal. This isn't "it would be nice" anymore. A kid connected to your sister's death is dead. You're writing violent fantasies. I need to rule out a concerning escalation of ideology. For your sake, as much as anyone's, the walls of the small room seemed to lean inward. The violent fantasies hung in the air, an accusation made real. She knew, not the specifics, but she knew the genre of his pain. "It's private," he said, but the defiance was weak, brittle. "It's just how I cope. It doesn't mean anything. Everything means something," Vance replied, her voice low and relentless. "Bring it to me, tomorrow, or I will get a warrant, and it will be taken from your house in front of your parents. Your choice." The image was a grenade in his mind. Police in his room, his mother's shattered face, his father's cold stare, the black leather journal carried out in an evidence bag. His secret self, laid bare. He said nothing. His silence was his last fortress. Vance sighed, a sound of professional disappointment. She stood up. "We're done for now. Think about it, Leo. Seriously." He fled the station, the buzz of the fluorescent lights following him out into the gray afternoon. He walked, not feeling the cold, his mind a riot of panic, and that stubborn, shameful thread of dark satisfaction. Back in the squad room, Vance stood before a fresh corkboard. She pinned a copy of the Markus Rye incident report to the left. In the center, she placed Ella Hartley's school photo, her smile a heartbreaking slash of light. To the right, she started a new column. She printed the driver's license photo of Chloe Finch and pinned it up. Then Tyler Vance, Jenna Palmer. She took a red marker and drew a careful line from Ella to Markus. Connected. She stared at Chloe's photo. Who's next? She thought, the detective's curse. Leo didn't go home. He went to the quiet, dusty back corner of the public library. In the shadow of a bookshelf on wilderness survival, he took out his journal. The panic had mutated. It was now a fizzing, creative energy. Vance wanted his thoughts. She'd get them. He'd show her what violent fantasy really looked like. It was an act of defiance, of proving his own twisted agency. He turned to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, "Chloe Finch, the correction." His pen began to move, not with frantic scratches, but with a deliberate, horrifying precision. He didn't just imagine her death. He designed it. "She must be made to see," he wrote, "not through her lens, but through the consequence of it. The cold, reflective surface should be the last thing she sees, her own wide eye. The one that framed a dying girl for likes, reflected back at her in the moment the lens shatters. The sound must be central, not a scream, but the crunch of the phone, the splintering of the screen that was her window to a world she curated. A high-pitched, crystalline shatter, then the wet, final silence. The light from the screen should die as she does, flickering out against the sharp edge that finds the soft space below her jaw. She filmed Ella's last moment of agency. Her last moment should be watching her own. He wrote until the page was full, the description so vivid he could hear the crunch, see the spray of glass, smell the ozone of dying electronics. He closed the cover, his heart hammering not just with fear, but with the terrible, thrilling completion. He had captured it, the perfect, symbolic justice. 2 blocks of stone were set in motion, one by law, one by grief. Their collision was now a matter of dreadful geometry. In the squad room, Detective Vance drew a red circle around Chloe Finch's name. In the library, Leo Hartley slid the journal, now burning with new and awful potential, back into his bag. The autopsy. The county coroner's office was a study in sanitized despair. The walls were the color of dried putty, the vinyl floor tiles gleamed under fluorescent lights that hummed a low mournful note, and the air held a persistent, astringent scent, formaldehyde undercut with lemon cleaner, an attempt to mask the essence of mortality that lingered in the very molecules of the place. It was the smell of questions answered in the most definitive, invasive way possible. Maya Hartley sat on a hard, molded plastic chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The posture was automatic, a relic of a time when she had a body to govern. Now, she felt like a ghost, transparent and weightless, watching her own form go through the motions. Next to her, Daniel was a monolith of stillness. He hadn't spoken since they'd parked the car. He just stared at the framed public health poster on the opposite wall about proper hand-washing technique, his eyes unblinking. A clerk with a kind, perpetually apologetic face had ushered them into this windowless consultation room. She slid a clipboard across the laminate desk. Just a few signatures for the release of personal effects, she'd murmured, as if speaking in a library. Maya took the pen. It was cold, impersonal. She signed where the yellow arrows pointed. Maya Hartley, mother. The words looked alien. Daniel signed beside her, his signature usually a confident, flowing mark reduced to a sharp, angular scratch. The clerk returned with a large, sealed paper bag. It had a barcode label. Hartley, Ella. DOA 10-14. She placed it gently on the desk between them. Her belongings from when she was admitted. Maya's fingers twitched. Inside that bag was her daughter's dress, stiff with dried blood and vomit. The missing platform boot. Her small crossbody purse. The last artifacts of the living Ella. The bag gave off a faint, heartbreaking scent, a whisper of citrus perfume clinging to the fabric, fighting a losing battle against the hospital's antiseptic smell. Before she could reach for it, the door opened again. The woman who entered was in her 50s, with shrewd, compassionate eyes behind practical glasses and hands that looked both strong and gentle. She wore a lab coat over street clothes. Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, Dr. Aris, the deputy medical examiner. Please accept my deepest condolences. She didn't offer to shake hands. She understood the unspoken boundaries of this room. She sat, opening a slim folder. We've completed the autopsy on Ella, she began, her voice low and steady, a practiced instrument for delivering impossible news. My purpose today is to walk you through our findings, to answer your questions as best I can. Maya nodded, a tiny mechanical motion. Daniel's gaze shifted from the poster to Dr. Aris's face, laser-focused. Dr. Aris spoke of the external examination, using careful, clinical terms. No signs of traumatic injury. Petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, consistent with acute intracranial pressure. Maya's mind translated, the burst blood vessels from her brain trying to swell out of her skull. Then, the internal. The words became a surreal, horrific poem. Cardiopulmonary system. Pulmonary edema. Cerebral hemispheres markedly swollen, gyri flattened. Herniation of the cerebellar tonsils. The definitive cause of death, Dr. Aris said, her finger resting on a line of text, was catastrophic cerebral edema, severe brain swelling resulting from a profound physiological stressor. The toxicology report tells us what that stressor was. She turned a page, revealing a graph and a list of chemical names that meant nothing to Maya. Ella's blood alcohol content was 0.18. Significantly intoxicated. She paused. And we isolated a significant quantity of a synthetic cathinone, specifically alpha-PVP. It's a stimulant, sometimes sold as bath salts. When combined with alcohol, especially in a high dose in a person without tolerance, it can trigger a cascading series of events, a massive release of serotonin, leading to a dangerous spike in blood pressure, fever, seizures, and in this case, the fatal edema. The room was silent, except for the hum of the lights. Dr. Aris looked from Maya to Daniel. There were no other adulterants. No fentanyl, no arsenic, no unexpected toxins. It was the interaction of the two substances themselves. Maya's mind, numb for days, latched onto this. So, she wasn't poisoned? Dr. Aris softened further. Not in the criminal sense of the word. No one slipped her something else. The pill she took, based on the metabolite profile, was what it was purported to be. The reaction was idiopathic, a perfect, terrible storm within her own physiology. Not poison. The words should have been a relief. There was no monster in the shadows, no malicious hand. Instead, a new, hollow chamber opened up inside Maya. It was an accident, a stupid, senseless, pharmacological accident. Her daughter was dead because of a bad mix, because of a choice at a party, because of a pill from a boy playing at being a dealer and vodka from a plastic pitcher. The banality of it was more crushing than any conspiracy. There was no one to rage against but fate, chemistry, and the ghost of her own daughter's poor judgment. She looked at Daniel. He had not moved, but something in his face had calcified. The grief was still there, a foundational layer, but on top of it now was a new expression. His eyes, fixed on the toxicology report, held a cold, clarifying fire. The vague, all-consuming anguish was being refined, focused through the lens of this clinical data. The target was no longer an abstract tragedy. It was a list. The provider of the pill, the host of the party, the pourer of the drinks, the bystanders, the ones who brought her home to die on a doorstep instead of to a hospital. They were the variables in the equation that equaled his daughter's death. Will there be charges? Maya heard herself ask. The good citizen. The mother following the script. Dr. Ari sighed. A small, tired exhalation. That is up to the district attorney's office and the police. They have the full report. Given the nature of the substance and its illegal status, they may pursue charges related to distribution against the individual who provided it. But for the death itself, she didn't finish. They all knew. It was a tragic accident. The world would move on. Dr. Ari slid copies of the reports into 2 manila envelopes and handed one to each of them. These are for you. Please, take your time. If you have questions later, Art is in there. The meeting was over. Maya stood, her legs watery. She picked up the paper bag of Ella's effects, clutching it to her chest. The faint, ghostly scent of citrus rose to meet her, a fleeting embrace from a world that no longer existed. Daniel took his envelope, the paper crisp and official in his hand. He didn't look at it. He looked through it, as if already reading the names he would inscribe on its blank back. They walked out of the chilled, silent office, through the double doors, and into the blinding, ordinary afternoon sun. The world was achingly normal. Cars passed. A bird sang. The sky was a cheery, heartless blue. Maya hugged the paper bag tighter, a vessel holding the ghost of her daughter's scent. Daniel's fingers tightened around the manila envelope, the edges digging into his palm. It was no longer just a report. It was a manifest, a receipt, a ledger of debts. They walked out into the blinding, ordinary sun, one carrying the ghost of their daughter's scent, the other carrying the blueprint for a dozen graves. A father's hands. The silence of the Hartley house after midnight was not peaceful. It was a held breath, a taut wire strung between 3 separate chambers of suffering. Daniel stood in the darkness of the upstairs hallway, a part of the architecture. He wore only socks, the hardwood floor cool beneath his feet. He had listened to Leo's return hours earlier, the hesitant key in the lock, the heavy tread on the stairs, the long, restless silence behind his bedroom door that spoke of a mind pacing, even if the body was still. Then, finally, the deep, uneven breathing of troubled sleep. It was time. He moved with the patience of tectonic shift. He knew the symphony of his own home, the groan of the 4th step, the sigh of the linen closet door, the particular whisper of air through the heating vent in the hall. He avoided them all. The 3rd floorboard from the top of the stairs creaked like a breaking bone. He stepped over it, a shadow disassociated from mass. Outside Leo's door, he paused, listened. The rasp of sleep. He turned the knob with infinite slowness, the click of the latch retreating into the mechanism, soundless. The door swung inward on well-oiled hinges. Daniel had oiled them himself, a week after Ella died. He had oiled every hinge in the house, a meaningless, meticulous task. Now, it served a purpose. The room was a cave of boyish clutter, frozen in time. College textbooks stacked like crumbling fortifications, band posters, a model spaceship half-painted on the desk. In the bed, Leo was a lump under the comforter, one arm flung out, fingers slightly curled, as if grasping for something in a dream. His face, in the faint streetlight glow, was younger in sleep, but etched with a permanent frown of grief. Daniel observed him dispassionately. His son, his accomplice, unaware. His gaze swept the room. The closet was too obvious. The desk drawers were for schoolboy secrets, old love notes, failed tests. The grief, the real poison, would be closer. He went to the bed. Kneeling, he slid a hand beneath the mattress, near the pillow. His fingers brushed cool leather. Almost immediately, predictable, he drew out the black journal. In his study downstairs, he did not turn on the overhead light. He lit the green-shaded brass desk lamp, pulling its chain with a soft tink. It cast a warm, focused pool on the polished wood, a stage for a single actor. He sat in his high-backed chair, the one from which he used to review blueprints for sunrooms and dormer additions. He opened the journal. The first pages were what he expected: smeared ink from tears, fragmented sentences of loss. "I can't breathe in this house. Her laugh is in the walls. Why didn't I go?" Daniel read them without emotion. They were the foundation, necessary but uninteresting. Then, the tone changed. The script sharpened. The page for Markus Rye was a storm of red ink. "I hope the pills melt your insides. I hope you choke on your own smirk. I hope you see your face in the dark before you die." It was rage, pure and childish. Daniel nodded slightly. The sentiment was correct, but the methodology was lacking. It was a wish, not a design. He turned the page, and there it was. Chloe Finch, the correction. Daniel's breath stilled. He read slowly, absorbing each word, each horrific, beautiful detail. "See her own eye reflected, the crunch of the phone, the light dying as she does, the soft space below the jaw." This was not a scream. This was a schematic. His son had taken the chaos of their pain and given it form, symmetry, symbolic logic. He had architected vengeance. A feeling unfolded in Daniel's chest, vast and cold. It was not horror. It was recognition. It was pride. In the dark cathedral of his own grief, he had been kneeling in silence. His son had entered and begun to chant the liturgy. They were singing the same hymn in different keys. Leo was the poet of their rage. And Daniel? He was the engineer. He picked up a pencil from his desk, a sharp, hard number 2. The kind used for drafting. He leaned over the journal. Next to Leo's line about the reflective surface, he made a small, precise notation in the margin: reflective surface. Car window, ice scraper, ensure glass particulate is ingested. It was a practical consideration, an improvement on the concept. A father helping with his son's homework. He read the entry once more, committing the chilling poetry of it to memory. Then he closed the journal. The leather was cool, pebbled. He carried it back upstairs. A sacred text returned to its shrine. He slid it under Leo's mattress, precisely where he had found it. He stood for a moment, looking down at his sleeping son. A strange, terrible tenderness washed over him. "We are not alone," he thought. "We are building this together, you and I. You just don't know it yet." He left the room as silently as he had entered. Instead of returning to bed, he went out the back kitchen door, into the pre-dawn chill. The grass was silvered with frost, crunching softly under his socks. He went to the sturdy, padlocked gardening shed at the back of the yard. From his pocket, he produced a small key. The lock opened with a solid clunk. Inside, the smell was of damp earth, potting soil, and the green, dying scent of last season's tomato plants. But beneath that, a sharper smell. He flicked on a battery-powered lantern. The shed was neat. Tools hung on pegboard outlines. But in the corner, under a burlap sack, was his other toolkit. He pulled it out, the hard-sided medical case. He opened it on the weathered workbench. The contents gleamed dully in the lantern light. Syringes, vials, the amber bottle, the square of cloth. They were clean, but he cleaned them again. It was the ritual. He uncapped a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, the pungent, hospital smell instantly overpowering the earthy scents. He soaked a lint-free cloth and wiped each item with the surgeon's care, polishing the glass of the vials, running the cloth along the length of each syringe. The cold metal of the needles caught the light. As he worked, a small transistor radio on a shelf, tuned to the local news station, played softly. The traffic report ended. The anchor's voice, bland and efficient, segued, in local news. The death of 21-year-old Markus Rye has been preliminarily ruled an accidental drug overdose. Police found the man in his apartment earlier this week. Authorities say no foul play is suspected. Daniel's hands did not pause in their methodical wiping. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. One down. The first proof of concept. The design, adapted from his son's angry scribbles, had held. He finished cleaning, closed the case. From his wallet, he removed a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases. It was a photocopy of the list of names from the autopsy report, the party attendees. He smoothed it on the workbench. Next to Markus Rye, he drew a small, precise checkmark in pencil. His eyes traveled down the list. They settled on the next name, Chloe Finch. The design was approved. The materials were prepared. All that remained was the groundbreaking. The unraveling. The air in the Serenity Haven funeral chapel was a thick, cloying soup of floral decay and floor polish. 1,000 lilies, roses, and carnations, their collective scent overpoweringly sweet, wilted under the relentless heat of concealed lighting, their pollen hanging in visible motes that danced in the beams of muted spotlights. Leo stood between his parents in the plush-carpeted receiving line, a mannequin in a stiff, borrowed black suit. His right hand felt damp and alien, repeatedly engulfed by the dry, papery grips of relatives he saw once a decade, and the soft, weeping clasps of his mother's friends. "So sorry for your loss, Leo. She was such a light. If you need anything." The words were a toneless, repetitive liturgy. He nodded each time, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle fibrillated in his cheek. His eyes were fixed on the middle distance, just over the shoulder of whoever was currently crushing his fingers, focusing on the great spray of white roses atop the closed casket at the front of the room. Closed casket. The director had suggested it, with a tactful cough, citing the nature of the trauma. The urn, a simple brushed steel cylinder containing all that was left of his vibrant, laughing sister, sat beside it. It looked impossibly small. Light, they'd said when they'd handed it to his father. You'd be surprised how light. His gaze drifted to the rows of pews. A clump of teenagers sat huddled together 4 rows back, a dark island in a sea of gray and white hair. He saw the back of Chloe's head, her blonde hair subdued, Jenna dabbing her eyes with the tissue, Aiden, looking at his shoes, Tyler, strangely blank-faced. They were a portrait of stunned guilt. They hadn't approached the family. They wouldn't. To Leo, they weren't mourners. They were exhibits. They were components of the machine that had crushed his sister. Watching them, a rage so pure and scalding boiled up in his gut that he felt his funeral face mask begin to sweat and crack. He wanted to scream. He wanted to walk over and scatter them like cockroaches. The last hand was shaken. The 3 of them turned as one and took the front pew. The service was a blur of gentle music and platitudes from a pastor who'd never met Ella. It spoke of a generic angel and God's plan. Words that felt like a violation. Leo didn't cry. He felt hollowed out, a fossil where a brother used to be. His mother wept quietly into a lace handkerchief, the sound a tiny, desperate animal. His father sat beside him, ramrod straight, his hands flat on his thighs, staring at the casket with an intensity that seemed less like grief and more like calculation, as if he was measuring it for some other purpose. The car ride home was a mobile tomb. Maya's soft cries had subsided into silent shudders. Daniel drove with the robotic precision, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road. The silence in the luxury SUV was absolute, pressurized, thicker than the bulletproof glass of the hearse they'd followed. It was a silence that screamed of the empty space in the back seat where Ella should have been, complaining about the somber music or fiddling with the window controls. Leo stared out his window, watching the world obscenely, offensively normal slide by. Their house, when they returned, had been transformed into an outpost of bereavement. The kitchen counters were a grim potluck of grief. Aluminum foiled casseroles, spiral-cut hams, towers of store-bought cookies, and a truly grotesque gelatin salad in the shape of a rainbow. Cards stood in drifts on the mantelpiece and dining table. The flowers from the funeral had arrived before them, their sickly sweet scent already colonizing the downstairs. The well-meaning invasion was complete. The last neighbor left with a final, whispered hug for Maya. The door closed. The 3 of them stood in the foyer, draped in the sudden, crushing quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hall clock, the sound of a family dissolving. It was Maya who moved first. She walked, as if drawn by a magnet, to the staircase. She placed her hand on the banister, looking up towards the 2nd floor, towards Ella's room. I should go change the sheets in there," she murmured, her voice frayed. "Keep the dust out." Daniel, who had been hanging his suit jacket with methodical care, went rigid. He turned slowly. His face, usually so controlled, was a tight mask of something volatile. "Don't," he said, the words slicing the air. Maya flinched, turning to look at him. "What? Don't go in there," Daniel repeated, his voice low, but vibrating with a strange intensity. "Leave it." "But it'll get musty. Her things are dead." The outburst was sudden, a crack of lightning in the stifling room. Daniel took a step forward, his eyes burning. "That room is a tomb, Maya. A museum to a corpse. Changing the sheets won't bring her back. It's just preservation of pain." Maya's face crumpled. "It's all I have left of her. You want to just seal it off? Pretend she never existed? I want to burn it." Daniel snarled, the words raw and shocking. "I want to take every shirt, every poster, every stupid stuffed animal, and set a match to it. Because it's not her, it's just the leftover shell, and staring at it is killing us." Leo stood frozen, a witness to the first open fracture. This wasn't an argument. It was the sound of two people's grief speaking different, mutually destructive languages. His mother's was a clinging, devotional pain. His father's was a furious, annihilating one. Maya stared at Daniel, her eyes wide with a kind of terror. Then, without another word, she turned and walked slowly up the stairs. She did not go into Ella's room. She went into her own and closed the door with a soft, final click. Daniel stood alone at the bottom of the stairs, his fists clenched, breathing hard. He looked up, then his gaze swung to Leo. For a second, Leo saw not his father, but a feral, trapped stranger. Then the mask slid back into place. Daniel turned and walked into the dark living room, leaving Leo alone in the foyer with the flowers and the cards and the echoing silence. The quiet was no longer just empty, it was malignant. It pressed in on Leo's eardrums, a high-pitched whine of absence. He couldn't stay in the open. He fled upstairs, but not to his room. He couldn't face the posters, the model spaceship, the normalcy. He went into his walk-in closet and shut the door behind him. In the absolute, fabric-muffled dark, the silence was complete. He fumbled for the old camping flashlight on a shelf, clicked it on. The beam was a stark, cone-shaped whirl. He sank to the floor, his back against a row of hanging shirts. The smell was of mothballs, cedar, and his own forgotten childhood. His eyes landed on a pile of old-school notebooks and sketchpads in the corner. He pulled out a thick, unlined sketchbook, its cover marbled black and white. He opened it. The first pages were old, half-finished drawings of dragons and spaceships from middle school. He flipped to a blank page near the middle. The white space glared in the flashlight beam, an invitation and a void. He didn't think of Ella's smile. He didn't think of the funeral. He thought of the clump of teenagers in the pews. He thought of the chemical names from the autopsy report his father had left on the kitchen table. He thought of the one name that started it all. At the top of the page, in careful, block letters, he wrote, "Markus Rye." Then, he began to draw. Not a face, not a person. He drew a diagram, a schematic, a pill bottle, exaggerated in size. Lines radiating from it, like shockwaves. He sketched a crude, stylized figure next to it, its mouth open in a silent O. He drew arrows indicating pathways, mouth, stomach, bloodstream, brain. He shaded the brain, dark, heavy scribbles of lead, pressing so hard the paper dimpled. He wrote words around the edges: choke, overheat, see her face, chemical fire. It wasn't a portrait of grief. It was a blueprint of causality, a design for reciprocal suffering. In the dark, with the smell of mothballs and old shoes, the first foundation of his terrible cathedral was laid, not in grief, but in geometry. The second verse, "The cold in the East Ridge Mall parking lot was the kind that didn't just bite. It settled into the bones, a deep, mineral stillness. The vast black expanse of asphalt, striped with fading yellow lines, was empty save for a few scattered islands of plowed snow, gray and gritty with road salt. The streetlights hummed, casting overlapping pools of sulfurous orange light that made the shadows between them seem ink black and bottomless. In the far corner, under a flickering lamp, Chloe Finch's silver Honda Civic sat like a discarded toy. Inside the car, the world was blue and small. The heater whirred on high, blowing dry, recycled air that smelled of old French fries and vanilla air freshener. Chloe was hunched over her phone, its cold, artificial glow the only light on her face. She'd scrolled past the smiling selfies, the group shots at the beach, the prom pictures. Her thumb moved with a frantic, jerky rhythm, deleting them. Tap, archive, tap, delete, a digital purge. But her thumb froze, hovering over one file. The file name was innocuous, Party 1014 Move. Her breath hitched. She tapped it. The video was shaky, the lighting a hellish swirl of strobe and shadow. The audio was a distorted roar of bass and shrieking laughter, her own laughter, tinny and sharp. The camera focused on Ella Hartley, dancing, her head thrown back, a beautiful, blurry mess. Then the focus lurched as Ella stumbled. The camera, Chloe's camera, zoomed in eagerly. It captured the moment Ella's eyes rolled back, the slackness of her jaw as she folded to the floor. A voice, Chloe's voice, off camera but clear. "Oh shit, Ella, get up, you're messing up my shot." She'd watched it 100 times, 1,000. It was a hair shirt, a spike under her fingernail. She analyzed every pixel of Ella's dying confusion, every decibel of her own stupid, vapid commentary. She'd come here, to this empty lot, because home was full of her parents' worried glances and the ghosts of normal conversations. Here, she could torture herself in peace. 40 yards away, nestled in a deep shadow between two mountainous snowbanks left by the plow, Daniel Hartley watched. He was a statue in a parka, his breath a faint plume that vanished instantly into the frozen air. In his gloved right hand, he held a new ice scraper. It was a simple, sturdy tool, a plastic handle fitted with a 12-inch blade of polished stainless steel. He had spent an hour that afternoon buffing the blade to a flawless, mirror finish. It reflected the orange streetlight now, a dull, waiting gleam. He had followed Chloe for 3 nights. She was a creature of haunted habit. She left her waitressing job, drove aimlessly, and always ended up here, in this concrete nowhere, to commune with her guilt on a 6-inch screen. It was pathetic. It was perfect. He watched the blue glow of her phone illuminate her face. He saw her flinch, saw her shoulders hunch. She was watching it. Good, he thought, a cold, clinical satisfaction warming the permafrost inside him. Remember what you did. He moved, not a rush, but a smooth, unhurried advance across the salted asphalt. His boots made no sound. The cold air parted before him. He was upon her car before the click of his footsteps on the frozen ground could possibly register. He didn't try the door. He didn't peer in. He simply raised the ice scraper and, with the hard, plastic knob on its end, tapped twice on her driver's side window. Tap, tap. In the silent, sealed capsule of her car, the sound was a gunshot. Chloe jolted as if electrocuted. Her head snapped up. The phone tumbled from her hands into her lap. The video still playing, Ella's silent, open-mouthed gasp on a loop. For a split second, her eyes met Daniel's in the dark glass. There was confusion, then a dawning, primal recognition. This wasn't a security guard. This was Ella's father. His face was calm, expressionless, a moon in the winter night. Terror ignited every nerve. Her hands flew to the door lock, jamming the button down. Her other hand fumbled for the keys in the ignition, her fingers slippery with panic. Daniel didn't hurry. He shifted the ice scraper to his left hand. From his parka pocket, he withdrew a spring-loaded center punch, a tool for shattering car windows in emergencies. He placed its tip against the glass, right by the door lock. Crack. The sound was not a boom, but a sharp, localized implosion, a spiderweb of fractures exploding across the window. Before the crystalline shards could even finish falling, Daniel's gloved hand shot through the hole, ignoring the daggers of glass, and unlocked the door from the inside. The door swung open. Frozen air flooded the warm car. Chloe screamed, a raw, airless sound. She scrambled across the center console towards the passenger door. Daniel was in the car. He moved with an economy that was horrifying. He dropped the center punch, grabbed a fistful of her puffer jacket, and yanked her back into the driver's seat with shocking force. He did not hit her. He did not yell. "Look," he said, his voice a quiet, measured monotone. He held up the ice scraper, turning the mirrored blade towards her face. "Look at what you are." In the highly polished steel, lit by the dashboard lights and the glow of her fallen foam, Chloe saw her own reflection, eyes wide with animal fear, mouth a dark O of terror. It was the same expression she'd captured on Ella's face. The correction was beginning. She thrashed, sobbing, trying to turn away. Daniel's free hand clamped on the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, forcing her to face the blade. "You filmed her," he whispered, his breath cold near her ear. "You made her a spectacle. Now be one." With his other hand, he reached down and plucked her phone from her lap. The video was still playing. Ella's silent cry. He pressed the button, freezing the image on his daughter's final moment of consciousness. Then, he did what Leo's journal had only hinted at, what his own marginal note had refined. He forced Chloe's jaw open. She gagged, teeth clacking. He shoved the phone into her mouth, screen first, the hard plastic corners grinding against her teeth and palate. Her screams became choked, wet gurgles. He looked into her eyes, still reflected in the ice scraper's blade. He saw the understanding there, the horrific, full-circle comprehension of her sin. "This is what it is to be observed in your worst moment." He raised the ice scraper, not by the handle, but gripping the mirrored blade itself with his gloved hand. He positioned the sturdy plastic handle against the back of the phone, now lodged in her mouth. He drove it forward, once, with the focused power of a man driving a chisel. The sound was multifaceted. The crunch of the phone's casing collapsing, the higher-pitched, splintering shatter of the screen disintegrating, the wet, muted pop from inside Chloe's mouth. Her body arched in a violent, silent seizure, her heels drumming against the floor mat. A fine spray of glass particulate, glittering in the dashboard light, misted the air. Then, silence. A profound, dripping, final silence. Daniel held her there for a moment, ensuring the lesson was complete. Then he let go. She slumped sideways against the seatbelt, a trickle of blood and saliva, speckled with tiny, glittering shards, tracing a path from her ruined mouth. He worked quickly, efficiently. He wiped the ice scraper's handle clean of his prints with the square of felt, then placed it on the passenger seat. He took her purse, scattered its contents, left the wallet, but took the cash, a crude gesture towards robbery. He reached through the broken window and popped the hood latch, then disconnected the battery cable to kill the interior lights. He left the door ajar. He walked away, back into the swallowing darkness between the snowbanks, a shadow reabsorbed by the night. He got into his own car, parked 2 streets over in a residential area. He started the engine, turned the heater on, but left the radio off. The silence was total, a void he carried with him. Back in the silver Honda, the only light came from the shattered phone. Its screen, cracked into 1,000 radiating lines, still glowed feebly, the frozen image of Ella Hartley, pixelated and broken. The light flickered, dimmed, pulsed once like a dying heartbeat. Then the screen went dark, the lesson taught. The second movement of the requiem was complete. In the sudden blackness, the mirrored blade of the ice scraper on the passenger seat caught a stray beam from the distant, humming streetlight. A single, cold wink in the vast, indifferent night.